This is The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. I'm writer-collector Ryan Condal.
And I am writer-collector and now very exciting House of the Dragon fan favorite, Dave Mandel. Welcome to The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. Yeah. We went live today, or last night, I guess, the first episode. So we're recording whatever episode this is.
Few weeks behind,
is this episode 4? So we're a little, we're behind or ahead, 5, however you want to think about it. But the premiere went live last night, and all of a sudden, I guess my what's new in props is I have a lot of House of the Dragon and Westeros followers who are going to be sorely disappointed by the lack of Westeros content on my Twitter feed. I think they're in for a disappointment. But
well, you have to give the people what they want, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah.
Serve them.
But yes, exactly. Hopefully they keep they came for the show and stay for the show, but my feed not so much. Yeah, sorry, but
they're about to get a lot of White House plumbers content that they didn't know they needed. Yeah,
they're gonna start changing their name to like Liddy's Lady and that stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I'm good, Dave. We're a few weeks ahead here, so. Because we're banking episodes as we go, but it's close enough to airtime. But we're actually the finale of the show, House of the Dragon, airs this weekend, so we're in the ramp up for that. We can be doing a bunch of press this weekend to talk a little bit about the show, but really to talk about the exciting launch of the new season of our podcast, exploiting my 30 minutes of the New York Times. Yes.
Just he didn't really talk about the show. It was mostly about a very sort of poorly attended podcast of some sort that has very few people listening.
Interesting move. We've become Dave. We've become like the guy, the actor, the famous actor who only like works just so he can fund his terrible rock band. I think that's what we've become. I had the end of the trilogy came out and all that, but what I really want to talk about is my terrible new rock album.
We are the equivalent of Daniel Day-Lewis when he actually just opens the shoe shop / butcher that he's going to like butcher shop that he's going to open. Yes.
The difference there is that those things are useful and additive
to true. That someone might want shoes and
humanity.
Or meat. Yes.
Yeah. Correct. And it's a skill. It's a quantifiable skill that one has to go learn a trade. This is just stupid.
No, we I believe cult is the active word here. Cult favorite, I guess. But
this is our version of therapy,
because none of this will matter because by then the episode will have aired. I don't want any spoilers, but is the final episode of the season going to shock me in any way, shape, or form? Do you think?
Yeah,
it is. Oh, that's exciting. Okay, cool. Yeah. And just this is more of a writing question. When I used to do Veep, okay, I used to go into my season kind of knowing what, like, as I was thinking about the next season, I always was like, I want to know what the first scene of the new season is, and in some ways I want to know what the final season of the last episode is, which then kind of propels you instantly into whatever the next season is.
Yeah.
And do you feel like however this ends is going to sort of set the tone for season 2?
Yes.
These are I'm trying to keep it very vague because I genuinely don't want spoilers. So I really don't. I visited the Succession set the other day. They were shooting here in LA.
Oh, cool.
And I accidentally got like sort of a spoiler that like is not particularly big or anything, and it still drove me crazy that I actually like which is like, no, I don't want to know that. Yeah, it was minor, but still. Yeah.
Was it Logan Roy saying "fuck off"?
Yes, he curses more this season. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was actually very cool. Tried to steal something, could not find anything to steal.
Nothing to steal.
Nothing good to steal. So yeah, sad. What's new in props? Anything going on with you, my friend? I gotta say, I will just say really quickly now, and I don't, before you say, how about you? For those people who've been listening and have heard the travails of my condo, while one or two odds and ends have sort of shown up, and of course I have nowhere to put them except in my other house, which I realize is a high class problem. This is beginning to sort of take its toll. Like there's a real sort of like, I'm not sure I can buy another thing until I figure this out. Like honest to God, it is affecting me on that level. So
Yeah.
I don't have a great answer to where anything is, but that is, so there's gonna be a lot less what's new in props on my end until I can figure something out. So what on your end, what's new in props, Ryan?
Well, yes, I'm sorry. I guess I have two as well because I have I have my LA storage
Yep.
where everything lives, and then I have my growing collection out here, which you can sort of see in the wings behind me. But I bought something new. I actually got a new prop. So there you go. What's new in props?
I'm going to
And
live vicariously through you and through your unflooded attic. That's what I'm going to live vicariously through. Yeah.
that's right. Always put it on the top floor. So if it floods, it's a roof leak, not a toilet leak.
With my
Um,
luck, it would be a roof leak. But yeah, go on.
yeah. Uh, I bought. This is actually very interesting because it was an old school deal, and very very excited about that. But yeah, I acquired Batman's utility belt from Batman 1989, and
That's excellent.
really thrilled. It's the hero, so it's the one you
Oh, wow.
actually see in the suit up scene when he like clicks the belt together.
The
It's that
click,
one.
the very famous
Yeah,
click. It's like
yeah.
he
It's
clicked, and I feel like every superhero movie for like 50 years now has a click in it. You know what
that,
I mean? It
that
just sort of
that's right.
it defined a genre of just sort of click. Yeah.
It's the suit up sequence of suit up sequences. I mean, it led to the Iron Man suit up sequence, which
Yep.
was what 20 years later or whatever, much more involved. But yeah, I was just it's wonderful, and I believe there's only one of them because it was only used specifically because a lot of times he's just wearing a urethane belt for all the movement, but this one has it's urethane and then has this big machined front the buckle to it to do the
So
click.
would this have also been Bob Ringwood? Would this have been part of the costume design, do we think? Or does this fall more, is this wardrobe or prop? I'm sort of curious
Yes,
to
I believe. I
think.
mean, I believe this all falls under wardrobe. And actually, I have one of the other things I have in my collection is, if you remember it from a few years ago, that
Oh, the
the
drawing, the
costume
art.
design.
Yeah.
Yeah, and though the costume is very different because it was his first go at it. The belt is there.
Oh, that's interesting.
he had the
So he kind of
iconography for
had the
that.
idea for the belt even then. Oh, that's
Yeah,
very, very cool.
yeah,
So
uh,
at this point, wait, let's just go through so your display, at least in theory, you've got, because I can see it over your left
yeah,
shoulder, but my right on
yeah.
my screen, that's the cowl is there,
Hmm.
and then somewhere in there is the gun, right? Is that
Yeah,
in
the
the
spear
case?
gun
Is
is
that is
there.
that
Yeah,
is that it
it's
sticking out there in
it's
the sort of
blocked.
back there? Okay.
Yeah, it's blocked a bit.
And
Yeah.
so will you sort of try and add the belt to that display, like almost like sitting under it, or are you going to try and create something where it's where the waist should be, or on its own, or you're still
No,
figuring it out? Do you know what I'm
I
saying?
think I'm just going to do them as artifacts, sort of. I think I have a move in my future, so there's a bigger case coming, and I think I'll be able to get more kind of horizontal space. So ideally, they'll all be kind of on the same on the same plane together, sort of spear gun cowl belt, and then there you go. I think that's my Batman
That's
collection. I don't know that I need to pursue anything more. Although I would love a Joker piece at
I
some point.
cannot wait to play this tape for you. It's
Yeah,
at
the
many
next
points over
auction.
the next 4 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Do these words sound familiar, Ryan? As you are sitting there in a
my
full bat suit. Yeah.
my
Um,
episode of Maury Povich. Yeah.
that's fantastic. I mean, look, we're old guys, but Keaton Batman. It's sort of pointless to say it again, but it's
It's great.
just the best. Michael Keaton, so damn good. I still love that costume. Just I don't know. Just I there are other Batman movies I've liked a lot, but I don't think I've ever liked any costume quite as much.
Yeah.
I've said
Yeah,
this
and I
before. I do. I love it. I'm jealous. That's excellent. That is
thank you.
a good week in props.
Thank
And
you.
you made a point, and there was a reason for all things that are said on this show. Well, not really, but you mentioned it was
Never.
an old school deal.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that? He asked, when you say an old school deal. And what might that throw to? What might those words,
What a
old
segue.
school? Yeah, exactly.
Um no, I it was a private deal, meaning we talked about it offline. There was no auction involved. I wasn't sitting there worrying about some, Bitcoin douche or hedge fund douche getting involved and coming in and spending too much money on it and taking me out. It was I mean, I bought it for a real number. I mean, I would say it was, it was market price. There was not really a deal to be had, but it was something that was discussed over a period of time. I knew that I was the only one in the mix. I was able to
Sure.
go and raise the funds, collect the funds, pay it off, and then I took it home without the stress of I knew a month ago that it was mine. So without the stress of having to wait for the auction date and having all the all the tumblers fall into place, which there's certainly an excitement to, and I think what I miss of the before days is the balance of those things. Some of your life was private dealing, some of your life was the thrill and excitement of
Yeah,
auctions.
although auctions obviously have we talked about this right from the beginning, have grown and grown and grown. The sort of the private deal, the private treaty, that was a much more active part of our world once upon a
Yeah,
time, and in some ways. And again, we're also talking about lower numbers occasionally, but in some ways, might account for a good solid couple of purchases each year, and that definitely has gone sort of out the window a little bit as sort of our world has changed.
yes.
But that's nice. That's actually really really nice. I mean, it happens every now and then for me. It's been a while, where to some extent people just look, I don't blame people. They don't want to leave money on the table, so to speak, and the promise of the auction is usually at least, well, I know I'll get X, so why should I sell it for X if there's the chance of getting you know X plus whatever, or
Right.
X even times whatever,
Right.
which is certainly possible. Well, that's pretty good. And why might we be talking about old school deals, as it turns out, Ryan?
Well, I thought we should cue up the music here, our tie-in song, as we did back with Sinatra in a previous episode. Glory Days. We'll just
Oh, hold
hum
on,
as
I've
it
got it. Hold on.
goes along.
On a warm summer's eve, on a train bound for nowhere.
This is our guest's theme song.
There we go.
He's the original old school collector and gambler. Not really, but we have this song.
Yeah.
Please say hello to our friend Tim Laws. Tim. hit the
Hello,
mute button.
gentlemen. How are
Oh, there he
you?
is.
Hi,
Hey.
Tim.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you? It's good to see you.
Tim, we thought
I
it
was
would be really
trying to
fun.
segue to Glory Days, and we were going to do a whole thing about
Thanks, man.
music
I appreciate
not
that. Yeah.
playing. But Dave has brought out the singing catalog from Julian's in the last, I don't know, 4 episodes. So now I think this is our new, ladies and gentlemen, George Lucas. It's
Yes, this is our new runner.
until the battery dies in that ridiculous fiasco of global warming and consumerism. I think we will see that on
I
every
will
episode.
recycle it. I promise to recycle it.
Can you recycle that thing?
I think I can tear it apart, and the cardboard can go in the kind of the paper recycle.
Okay.
And then the electronics can go to an electronic recycling thing.
Okay.
Or at least
Okay,
the
very good.
battery, the dead battery. So yes.
You, my friend, will be the only one of the 2,000 people that receive that
is
catalog.
very, very true. Yes,
Yeah.
including Kenny Rogers himself.
Right.
Hi, Tim. Tim,
Hello, David.
let's just jump into this and get this out of the way, which is, how long have you been collecting props? Like, when?
No,
do you,
how old am I?
Yeah,
That's
like,
what you're
how
really
old
saying.
are
Is
you?
how old?
Because you do look great. You look fantastic.
Thank you, man. But I was thinking
You
about
don't
this.
age.
Like,
I feel like you look exactly the same the day I met you.
He
But
doesn't
anyway.
have children, Dave, so
Is that the secret? Okay.
Yes, he's
Fair
got
enough.
the glow.
Yeah.
I started collecting in 1987.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. So that is truly
Very
school.
old.
Yeah. Very,
Yeah.
very old school. But
Yeah,
again,
so the reason that we wanted to cover this topic was because I've always been fascinated, particularly with this period. I mean, I was fascinated. I started collecting fairly late compared to our sort of inner circle, but I've always been fascinated with what was it like before I got involved, before people really knew. By the time I got involved, it was getting more mainstream. It was there were more people, finding their way to the hobby, which at this point is 15 years ago, which is hilarious. But I was always fascinated with the sort of early 2000s when everybody was kind of figuring this stuff out, when there was, gold to be had in them Thar Hills. But I've really been fascinated with the pre-era, which is the kind of before the internet era of collecting. And there are only a few collectors left from, certainly that are in our circle. that
What are you saying? We're dead? What are you saying?
some are dead.
Many murdered.
Many
Many murdered.
killed for their collections.
Unsolved
Yeah,
murders.
weird.
Strangely
a lot of them.
unsolved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, check my new bat belt. And then, no, but I think some have just moved on and, you know, sold their collections off or cycled out or stopped collecting. So I've just been really fascinated with these kind of previous periods, and with yours being the kind of most previous, because you found your way into this world before the internet existed and before everything was linked up, you know, worldwide by being able to email and going to websites and you know, auction catalogs and things like that. And especially because you're not, most of the guys that I know, and Dave, you know, jump in, but most of the guys I know from that world, the pre-internet world, were LA guys because they were there in the hub of filmmaking, maybe even working in filmmaking themselves, starting to trade and see things around and collect things. You know, the Ruby Slippers book that we've talked about, that all started in LA because that's where the movies were made. Certainly plenty of movies made in London, which might have to do with it. But anyway, that is the reason for,
I mean, I was
the good old
say
days
the
episode.
London thing sort of does make sense, though, which I had never really stopped and thought about until just now. But obviously, you were around it back then, and I also want to, and we'll get to all of this, but also, in some ways, you were there before, but then you were in on the ground floor of Prop Store, where you still work to this day, where in some ways it was the eventually creation of these sort of official, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of prop dealing entities, which led to more auctions and online sales and all of those things. And so in some ways you have been almost not responsible, but certainly involved in the demise of the way it used to be, strangely enough, which, you know, again, it's sort of perhaps ironic depending on how much you miss it or not. I guess we'll find out. So to jump in from the very beginning, Tim, when you first bought that first piece, I'm assuming you were a kid, right? You were basically just a young fan, more or less. I mean, is that, and for you, was it things popping up like at shows, like at autograph shows and whatnot? Is that the start of it, or what's the start? What's your first piece? How did you find it? Just take us back to that for a
Sure.
sec.
I used to collect posters, autographs, all the usual stuff that we all kind of were interested in when we were younger. And it went back actually to, I was on a train going into London with my girlfriend at the time, and there was a magazine that we were reading just to take the time. And in the magazine was an advert for an auction of movie costumes, and it just caught my eye. And viewing was that day. The first day of viewing was that day, and I said to her, "Do you mind? Can we just go and check it out?" And I guess it's the writer's thing. Little did I know that was going to change my life. You know, it has absolutely changed my life. That reading that advert has sent me on a path that I never ever thought I would, you know, go down.
Was it
That's
a
wild.
studio or an individual production, or what was it? What did it turn out to be?
It was that Bonham sale of 1987 that was Tiny Nickel's collection of, you know, he's clearing out his warehouse. So it was Bond, it was Aliens, it was Pink Panther. And
famous auction.
So we went along to the viewing. It was in Hammersmith in London. So it was a bit out of the way. It wasn't central London. We went along, and I always sort of joke about it. We arrived, and the guys were literally taking Aliens armor out of boxes and trying to sort it into sets. And to this day, people are trying to rearrange those sets back to how they should be. You know,
those guys that kind of mistakenly put the wrong, you know, shoulder pads with whatever,
Absolutely.
we're all suffering to this day.
Yeah.
That's
to this
hilarious.
day,
That looks like a costume. Let's sell it that way. Yeah.
So I actually found it the other night. It's the only catalogue I've ever kept. So this is the Bonhams catalogue.
Oh,
dear
fantastic.
Lord, that is a collector's item unto itself.
It weighs, you know, you've seen the latest Prop Store catalogue. This thing weighs like an ounce.
Are there photos in it, or is it just listings?
Not many. I'll post some pictures up for you guys. But there's the suit of armour.
Oh, there you go.
Wow. That's a Frost set.
Standing next to Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, so... you know,
is that Barry Lyndon or is that Blackadder?
I don't know what that is. But, you know, you can get your harem costumes.
Yeah.
So I'll post some pictures of this week. The catalogue cost £2.50.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. August
and when
1987.
you think back to that first visitation, were there faces? Were there other people there that sort of like to the, like that you then got to over the, like, did you first like sort of, I don't know what the word is, meet the community or faces that became a part of your life, or
No,
was it, you weren't there yet? Yeah.
I wasn't there to socialize this, it was,
It was all business, all right out of the gate.
right from the start.
He was a cutthroat collector from the very start.
Did you bid? What did you bid on? What did you win or lose?
There were, turns out there were a few people there. I subsequently, David Oliver, I know, was there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But we never met. And funny enough, Stephen Lane's now wife, Lizzie, was also there, which is bizarre.
That's wild, but not Stephen.
That is bizarre. Not Stephen.
That's wild.
I always thought Lizzie just sort of put up with this, but she was actually there.
She might have started it.
Well, this was the where's this was the birth of the collector for Tim. This was the original annoyance for Lizzie.
Yeah, it started back there. Yeah,
the first eye roll, and then it stayed with her for the rest of her life. That's wild.
That's right.
Was Harry Harris present? Was this a?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. But
he would have been in London.
Discussed that with. There was certainly a few guys
London
that
aliens
are
guy
still around who were at that sale.
Okay,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was. I was just flicking through it actually, and some of the prices. The Sigourney Weaver spacesuit from Alien, which was kind of one of the star lots, went
$7.
£320. Yeah, £320. Can you believe that?
That's great. Plus premium.
Yeah, which was like
which was 1%. Yeah.
So, that's back when 25% was reasonable because it was £300.
Right.
So did you win anything? Did you
I
actually
came away
bid and
with,
win? Okay.
Yeah. I was a young guy, already had credit card debt, so I was not as always. It's all about timing, and timing was not great. So I wanted a suit of marine armor. Even then, I wanted the Hicks armor. It was actually the very set, David, that you had, because it still had the lot number on
you
the
may
back.
have told me that at some point.
Yeah.
I think you may have told me that at some point.
That was the single lot that I went to the auction for. It just, even at £200-300 a set of armor, I couldn't afford it. So it's all relative. I came away with the white Michael Douglas suit from Jewel of the Nile, which has recently been resold by Prop Store.
That's awesome.
I think it was £80, £60, £80, something like that. And that's it. I'm hooked. I'm in. That's it. I'm done.
That was it. It was just that.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
2 important questions. One, I want to know what your next move is. And 2, I want to know how quickly that girl that you were with, that you said, like, do you mind if we go? How quickly did you two break up after that?
Actually, she was gone about 4 weeks later.
Yeah, okay. I'm not a shock.
The Michael Douglas Jewel of the Nile suit outlived the girl. Yeah.
Yeah, she took that. Yeah, damn.
Yeah.
Once owning that, I started going to what is now the Comic Cons of the UK at that time, which were sort of local car boot sales almost, garage sale, just flea market type shows, which were fantastic. And we look back with those with very fond memories too. But then that's when I started meeting people. I started meeting other guys, and we're only talking about a handful of people that were interested in collecting props and costumes. It was costumes for me at that point. Not props were, again, something I hadn't even considered. And the next thing that happened, so I began to get a little network of collectors and friends, and then I started trying to be proactive about trying to find this stuff and where it came from.
And sorry, I'm going to back you up to the network.
Sure.
In those days, again, no internet, so what did that mean?
We barely had telephones, Dave.
Right. I was going to say, were you just kind of like, let's meet at a show? Was it more just calling each other up? In the early days of comic art collecting, and I wasn't a part of it, it kind of was a little bit before me, but there were a bunch of guys that literally used to, like, once every month would make Xeroxes of their art and then kind of like send it to each other like a chain letter. And that's how they would share their art. And then they'd, each month someone would, talk about one of their favorite pieces or a new pickup that you had to share. And it was all done, just by the mail and Xeroxes. So like, what was the interaction? Like, what was, because again, nowadays it'll be like, oh, there's an auction, let's go meet at the auction or whatever. Where were you guys meeting up? How often were you seeing people? Like, what were those connections even before whatever the next thing was?
Well, the UK guys, it was very much telephone. I seem to speak to guys on the telephone. And then we would meet up at these shows, but very rarely was it prearranged. And there was no community really, because there was no real trade in this stuff. And there was so little of it around that nobody had this stuff. It wasn't like you'd meet another collector and he's got a room full of costumes. One guy might have one prop that he picked up because he did a toy deal, or a costume because he knew somebody else who. The stuff was not around, and that Bonham's auction was really where suddenly there was material to be traded, because people were starting to trade in those marine costumes pretty early on, and still to this day it baffles me how much of that stuff from that auction has never seen the light of day again. I don't know where it's gone.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, massive percentage. When you have a look through the listings, you'll see there's stuff you've not seen before.
If
That's
there was
wild.
one piece in that catalog that you remember that has never shown itself, what would be the piece you most would like to go back in the time machine?
Yeah, it's not the piece I'd want to own, but the star lot of the day was Grace Jones's costume from A View to a Kill, because it was leather and suede. It was very elaborate. It was expensive to make, and I think that went for like £400. So it was like the most expensive lot of the day. I don't know where it went. I've never seen it since.
I'd like to think that Grace Jones bought it. I'd like to think
nice.
she bought her own
Grace
costume
Jones,
back. Yeah,
present
that's
at the
what my
auction.
hope. That's what I hope, that she has that somewhere. Yeah.
So
that's not in the Bond collection. I know that. That's not in the.
See, where did it go? It's fascinating. Somebody bought that and has probably kept it.
And the other issue I imagine at this time was that there was this great Bonhams auction, but this was not a regular thing, right? At this point, Profiles didn't exist. Christie's did not have a regular film and television memorabilia auction. So, because if
they did, it was movie posters only, probably.
Well, it was rock and roll.
Like
it was all about rock and roll memorabilia back then.
Okay.
And so Phillips, Sotheby's, and Christie's were doing rock and roll sales, and there were maybe 3 or 4 lots of movie stuff in there. But I would still go to those auctions just in case there was something to have. But the next thing for me was I went traveling in 1988. I went on a kind of tour of America, and I forgot. I left behind props. The girlfriend went traveling, and when I got to LA, I went to see Joe Madalena, because at that time I was buying autographs, and Profiles were the autograph dealers. It was I used to buy things from them. I thought I need to go and visit them. So I went to Beverly Hills, and they were in the Bank of America building at that time. And Joe was a great host. He looked after me. We had a good chat, talking about autographs, because that was still my main collecting. And out on the couch in his lobby, he had a Laurence Olivier cloak from, I think, Richard III, or one of those classic Shakespeare. And we just got to talking about it, and we both sort of said that why isn't there a bigger trade in this, and why isn't there a bigger market in this, and why isn't more stuff being traded? And that was a conversation we had in 1988, I think. And to be fair, Joe, he truly believed what he was saying, and that's a couple of years later, Profiles was around. Didn't take long.
Tim, were you the Forrest Gump of movie prop collecting? Did you go around the world and just seed the idea for that? Eventually, you met Steven, and he was trying to have a normal business and a normal.
He was trying to sell
life.
cars at that time.
Yeah. And you're like, no.
Like, I've got an idea, and I know a girl that you should date. I met her at the first auction. Yeah. You're gonna love her. Yeah.
But I didn't tell Joe anything he didn't already know. He absolutely.
He was
both
on
had the same. Yeah, sure.
Do you still have your autographs to this day?
I have some. I have kept some. Okay. I've sold a lot.
Sure.
The ones I have now are kind of the personal ones that were assigned to me, or because I used to do the whole stage door thing, and
really?
It was Elizabeth Taylor and Charlton Heston, people
you
like
would
that.
Just if somebody was doing like something on the West End, you would wait for that. You would wait there. Oh wow,
do the whole stage door thing. Yeah.
So you met Liz Taylor?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's really
Charlton Heston. I met, in fact, the same girlfriend. She met Charlton Heston as well, because we used to go up and then Charlton Heston took quite a shine to her.
Well, there you go. That explains the breakup.
I'm just curious and there's no right or wrong answer. Would you actually go and see plays too, or were you just more like I'm just going down? Okay,
no money, couldn't afford it, just couldn't. And that was the only way. That was the cheapest way to get autographs, was go and get them.
Wow,
that's wild.
That's very cool, though. I like that.
So what? I mean, what was your
Did you
Because
find other props on? Sorry, I was going to just back to
No, so
the
okay,
LA
so
trip. Did you meet people? Did you
right,
start
so
to?
I just started to look around LA, and I kind of did two trips, 88, 89. I spent, probably 8, 9 months traveling around America, all over America, but did seem to gravitate to LA at that time. And there were shops. There was a shop on Melrose called A Star Is Worn,
Yep.
and there was obviously Starwares
Star Wares, they
in
existed back then.
Santa
Were they
Monica,
on the Rob?
in Santa Monica, Main Street, Santa
Oh,
Monica.
okay. That's not where I thought they were. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so that was, I think they opened in '89. Yeah, I'm struggling to the timeline, but I certainly realised there was certainly a much bigger opportunity in Los Angeles to acquire um, props and costumes from movies that I really loved. Much broader spectrum of movies. So when I came back to the UK, I started just putting two and two together, and that was to round up as many props and costumes as I could in the UK and fly them out to America, because these guys didn't have any real access to Aliens, Batman, Little Shop of Horrors. I remember having bits and pieces from that. Those sort of movies from that time period. And my
To
whole business,
sell or to trade for things you wanted, or
that was it.
That
I'm
was the
still a
idea.
collector. Yeah, I'm still a collector. So my objective on each trip was to fly out with a kind of suitcase full of whatever it was, cover my room, cover my flight, cover my expenses, and if I could come back with an addition to my collection, or advanced my position, then I was happy. I had no plans for a business. I had no plans for world domination. I just wanted to make my collection better and obviously have a great time. Couple of weeks every few months by flying out to LA.
In this world at all, were any of the UK collectors, sort of, for lack of a better word, asking you to look for things in LA for them? Like, were you in that kind of a relationship at all? I'm not even talking about a business. I just mean like whoever your best bud was back then, that they might say, keep your eye out for blank, or you'd get to LA and realize, oh my God, so and so loves this movie. I gotta make a long distance call. Was there some of that as well?
Yeah,
Like, were you?
it was more the latter. It was more that I think, oh, I know this guy likes this movie. I've got a good chance to trade that. And there was no email. I couldn't text him.
Right.
It
So
was
you just
I'll,
kind of
I'll
rolled
take
the
a flyer.
dice.
Yeah, if this is a good piece, I'll take it home. But usually I went with a suitcase and came back with the one thing that I wanted. That was generally, I didn't often bring back stuff to trade again in the UK. It did happen, but it was more of a one-way thing because nobody else was flying out at that point.
So presuming that the Michael Douglas suit from Jewel of the Nile was not your holy grail of movie props, and that was more of a target of opportunity, what was the first thing that you bought that you held in your hands and you couldn't believe you owned it because you loved the film so much?
I think while I was traveling, again, another magazine advert, there was a guy in Lancaster County in California who was selling costumes via a kind of mail out that he did. Like every month, he'd send out like 6 sheets of A4 with a list of costumes. And obviously, he'd send one to me in the UK. And obviously, I'm already 4 or 5 days behind everyone else.
I was about to say,
because
you must have been like, at that point, like things were just gone. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But he had some stuff from Total Recall. And that was the first time I bought. This would have been, what year did Total Recall come out? It was
89, 90, I bet.
In the 1990, yeah, I want to say. I think it was the first of the 90s.
See, I don't feel like that could have been the first. But that was, certainly it was Schwarzenegger. And 1990, I got the Total Recall. It was the salmon shirt and the sort of green trousers from the earlier scenes, and that
with
was
the windbreaker as well, or no jacket, just the shirt.
Yeah,
okay,
shirt and trousers. But that was the first time because Schwarzenegger was everywhere at that
when
point.
He was the fittest construction worker that ever lived.
Had ever lived. So that was the first thing, and I thought this is really something. This is. I definitely had stuff before that, but I think that might have been the first piece where I actually thought this is something. And very soon after, I bought the Terminator 1 jacket. Starwares.
Wow, that
was $4,000, guys. That was a big deal. That took me 6 months to pay that off. That was a That's
Yeah,
a
I mean
lot
that
of
was
money.
that.
And is
That was a huge deal at the time.
is that when you start kind of, for lack of a better word, going through the collection of movie posters and autographs and start selling some of that
Oh, for
stuff
sure.
too?
No, I've done
Yeah.
that already at this
Like
point.
very
Yeah.
quickly you
Yeah.
realize this is what I want, less of this to some extent.
Yeah, even when I went to see Joe, I knew I wasn't buying autographs anymore. In '88, that was I'd already decided this is what I wanted to do. That it was just much more exciting having something that's much more unique, something that's individual, rather than autographs. I know they're inherently unique, but
Was there
everybody's got
any autograph you ever did really want that you just never got, like to some extent? Was there
not
one that was
really
like on your
because
wish list? Okay.
no,
He's
not
always
really. I
wanted
didn't.
a David Mandel.
Yeah, never got it. He's so rude, man. He just
He
won't
doesn't
sign.
sign. He does not sign.
Doesn't come to the
Yeah.
stage
He
door.
has someone that signs for him, so you got to be careful when you get like baseballs that they're
Yeah.
not just signed by like someone in the clubhouse. No, I think I may have said this on the show once before. I spent a lot of time trying to find like, guys that I had no chance of ever meeting, at this point, like Orson Welles, but hope against hope that there'd be like a to David, like obviously not my last name, but just like that there would have been a guy, that he met named David. It would be like to David, Orson Welles, to David, Marilyn Monroe. But it seems like in those days, people wrote the last names on the autographs. So whenever you see a lot of autographs, it's always like, to Dave Johnson, and you're just like, screw me,
Definitely
it's
from
not
the classic Hollywood golden era,
Yes.
that did seem to be the way.
Yeah, it just seemed much more, you're not selling this on eBay kind of a thing. Like they kind of knew eBay was coming. But
my full name is Lucky eBay Bidder. Surely it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So Tim, when you were tracking down stuff in the UK, was that all car boot sales, or were you at this point
No,
meeting
that was-
other collectors?
Yeah, meeting a couple of good friends, Andy and Ian, who are still friends to this day, who had contacts at Pinewood Studios. And so it was going to source. It was starting to try and get things from the crew guys.
The people that made the movie.
Yeah, I wasn't, looking back, I wasn't as proactive as I could have been by any stretch. I could have really gone out and, got call sheets, got phone numbers, started
Shaking the trees.
knocking on doors. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I didn't. I was, like I say, I had no ambition to create a business or any kind of business model. It was all about my collecting. It was just how can I improve my own collection. And sometimes I remember getting a puzzle cube from Hellraiser in 88, 89 and thinking, this is a great piece, I could keep this. But again, it was worth more in a trade for, another Schwarzenegger piece. Or I remember getting one of those Predator combat vests, not Predator, Commando.
okay.
Which is a really cool piece. So I
Yeah.
think the puzzle kid went for one of those. As best I remember.
So Schwarzenegger was your
very
first
early on,
biggie.
big. I just all of a sudden seemed to have a whole shitload of Schwarzenegger stuff. And
When did Clint Eastwood sort of enter into your world? Only in that I know, obviously, we've known each other a while now. I know not only do you collect and the posters and all of that kind of stuff, but obviously you've actually, for those that don't know, you've actually been like an extra in a couple of his films and actually met the man. And I've seen great pictures and all that kind of stuff. But where does Eastwood sort of enter into your collecting field?
he's always been there, but Clint is one of these modern stars who has the foresight, for whatever reason, to hold on to everything. And generally speaking, Clint Eastwood wardrobe, Clint Eastwood props of any magnitude are just not available. He keeps them in a store on the Warner Brothers lot, and there's a very, very few items out there. And right from the start, I wanted something on Clint Eastwood. Just couldn't find it.
So he was always in the back of your mind as you were kind of in.
For sure.
And when you were coming to LA, you were asking the people you were meeting, is there any Eastwood?
100%.
Is there any Eastwood?
Yeah.
Okay, fascinating.
Yeah. Even today, though, you go out looking for Clint Eastwood stuff. It's a pretty tough search to find anything good.
That's wild.
Is in those early days, is there something great that sort of passed across your vision that you really regret not jumping on, either because you couldn't afford it at the time or simply you weren't interested, but now it would be, I didn't want those ruby slippers, but man, I wish I had made an offer.
I'm not sure there's anything I look back on with any regret. I mean, the interesting thing, and I was thinking about this as well, knowing I'm coming on this show to talk about this, one thing that I'm now very aware of is that the money's at no point at any time did I think this is going to be worth some money in the future. At no
Really?
point, even a year down the road, did I think, oh, I can sell this in 6 months and double my money. At no point did I think we'd be seeing 6 and 7 figure, for movie props and costumes.
But I mean, there's something wonderful about you were truly just buying it because you loved it.
Buying 'cause you
And
love it.
maybe at
It's,
worst, you were thinking, I might be able to trade this for something slightly better, but certainly no vision of someone's going to give me
no,
$100,000 for
quite.
this at any point.
100%.
Yeah.
And I would say that was the same with all the other guys I was dealing with as well. Even the guys in LA. I think Jim Latta was a guy I met at that point, and he had very similar taste to me. You know, he was Terminator, he was Aliens, he was into those same movies. So we became pretty good friends because I was supplying stuff to him that he absolutely couldn't get anywhere else. But there was no. In fact, Jim had some of the best stuff because he had like the Terminator arm and the Terminator head, and he had all
But
that.
he wasn't doing, was he doing icons yet or not yet
No,
at that point? He just was a
no.
collector and was
He
just,
was just a
yeah.
collector. I remember going to a couple of his shows. You know, he did these Comic Con style shows. I certainly I found a flyer for one in 1993, which is a bit later. That was a Blast from the Past or Back to the Past or something he called the show. I think that was in Pasadena. That was a bit later, but you know these guys were
So
all the same.
would you schedule your trips around like trying to go, like if you knew there was a show in LA, would you?
No, no. As soon
No,
as I
just
had the stuff in
you
my suitcase and enough money for the flight,
just went,
off
just went.
I'd go again. Yeah.
What was the best thing that he had at the time? Because he's sort of one of these legendary collectors that had
Yeah.
everything.
I've got like I said, I'll post up the flyer, the '93 flyer. I'll send you a picture of that. And there's some stuff on there. He had a T1 jacket as well, a different one.
Mm.
I think he had a T2 jacket. But I remember the big deal at that time. It didn't interest me so much. Was he had all the mirror Star Trek uniforms.
Oh wow!
For all the main characters, and they were all on a display.
Wow.
And I remember those being a huge deal for people at that time.
Did he source that from right from Paramount? Did he get those all at the same time?
David,
I
you might
wonder
know
if that
better on
was
that.
with. I would wonder if that was with Rob Klein. I wonder if
Mm.
that would make sense. That
Could
perhaps.
be, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a guy who's been around longer than me, Rob Klein. You know, he's even older than me.
He is old school as
yeah.
well. He's old school.
Yeah.
Did you ever bump into Rob Klein back in the day,
Not
whether
back
by
then.
reputation or name or anything like that?
Not back
Like,
then, at least not that I remember. There's certainly most of the guys that I dealt with back then are no longer kind of active in the field.
when you look back on it, what do you? And again,
Because they're dead.
murdered. When you look back on it, and again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. Do you think when you look back on the guys that are gone from the field, and obviously everybody changes, interests change, whatever, but do you think that is connected to the money and the way the money sort of eventually changed the hobby when you like sort of think back on how and when they dropped out? Is it
It's
as it
possible.
professionalized, as it got a little more serious?
I would say that's unlikely because I feel like the guys I was dealing with back then were all pretty wealthy. They were older than me. They had more disposable income. And the prices weren't getting that crazy at that point. They were still very affordable. You had $2,000, you could pretty much get what you wanted. There weren't too many things that were $5,000 plus.
Right. So they just kind of moved on, or as we said,
I guess
died
so.
or something.
I just stopped dealing with them, or I did a lot of business through Marsha at Star Wars, and Marsha was just still is a friend of mine, a wonderful, wonderful person, and I would always gravitate to Star Wars as my base. First of all, because it's Santa Monica.
See, I'm sorry.
Beach.
This is why I can't believe you never bumped into Rob, because I mean, I don't know Marsha. I've done business with her, but through Rob, which is it just feels like you guys were probably in Star Wars
In the shop at the same time.
and have no idea,
I
which is
would think
kind of funny.
I used to hang out there a lot, and I used to probably bug the head out of Marsha. But Marsha looked after me, and I stayed at her house, and
wow.
she would, we would firm friends. She was absolutely instrumental in me loving what I do. She was very, very important at that time in the very early 90s.
That's great.
So when does it start to change? When do you feel like you start to notice the change? And whatever you like, what are those changes? What do you notice? Like as you're,
it's very gradual, Dave. It was just seeing more and more stuff come to auction in the UK. The sections in those rock and roll catalogs getting bigger.
And then almost turning into their own catalogs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're seeing at the shows that we went to that there were more and more guys with their tables having movie props and movie costumes. And then as it went through the 90s, it was just that there were more people to deal with. I stopped traveling out to the States, I don't know, mid 90s probably.
Because you were doing other stuff, or it was no longer worth your time in terms
it
of the
was,
pack up a suitcase and go? Like, had that
yeah,
changed?
I carried on dealing with Marsha. I just think I was probably making the money I needed to on my trades in the UK at that point, and I would just pick up the phone to Marsha and say, "What have you got?" And with some money to spend, I carried on going out to America, but it wasn't those sort of trips
Were
anymore.
you still occasionally, when you were talking to Marcia and she had something great, were you ever saying, "Oh, I found some blank from Batman"? Like, was she were you finding or sourcing UK stuff for her, or it was
Yeah, for
more of
sure.
just okay,
That would still happen in a case she would ask for something in particular, and I would find it, or if I had something or access to something, I might mention it. So there was still a relationship there, but it just wasn't the sun wasn't shining quite as much on that particular hayfield. It
sure.
was, but it was still good, and I could still buy and sell what I wanted. And then, as the '90s developed, that's when I met Stephen, and well, look what happened.
Yeah. Well, how did that all go down? Because obviously that's a major benchmark milestone in your life as both a man and a collector. Meeting Stephen.
Yeah, so Stephen is just a very similar character to me in most respects of the collecting, in that he shares the passion, shares the love, shares the interest. The difference is he's a businessman, and a very, very good businessman, and he just sees an opportunity right from the early days. He was talking about what he could do. He was doing the same thing like we all do. We all traded, bought and sold purely to generate interest on our own collection and improve our own collections. But he could see an opportunity. He could see that there was something to be made. And of course, the
So
important
he was looking at it this in a similar way to the way Joe was looking
but
at
the
it.
big thing, of
Like you
course,
were doing your thing, but they were,
yeah,
I guess, yeah, it's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what you got to realize in 1997, 1998, internet. That's it. That's the difference, and
That's
that's what
that's the
turns.
moment. Wow.
That's what turns something where we're all running around amateur style, doing this, to something that can be formulated. We call it, a global niche business, because that's what it is. You've got a handful of people in every country who are into this, and the internet is the one thing that unites them. It brings us all together.
I can remember, and again, not props because I wasn't into props yet, but again, to talk about comic art collecting for a second, in those early days of eBay, and I'm not just talking a few days, like a couple of years of eBay, where incredible items, like genuine incredible items, like John Byrne X-Men, Watchmen pages, again, the creme de la creme, the Schwarzenegger, the Star Wars, whatever you want to say of prop collecting, would show up on eBay. It would be right. It would be real. There'd be, a bidding war, and, before, like, sniping programs, it was like, how good could you be to, get your bid in right before, all of that kind of nonsense. But it is just hard to imagine incredible stuff on eBay if you've been on eBay anytime recently. You know what I mean?
No,
And was
I
it,
agree. I agree.
yeah, I assume it was the same for props in those first few years.
I signed up on eBay, I think 1998. The first thing I bought was Samuel Jackson's black suit from Pulp Fiction. That was the first
That's
thing I bought off eBay.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And this is,
Were you nervous? I mean, and I know it's a hard thing to think back on. Were you wondering, or it just looked right and
no,
you
look, right.
press a button, I'm gonna send the money and it'll
I'm
be
new
okay?
to eBay, so I didn't even know how eBay works. So I messaged the guy who was selling it, and he turned out to be Bruce Willis's stunt double and not stunt double, he was his stand-in. And he told me all about it, and I was immediately comfortable with who he was and what he had. But then it was me asking him, how do I bid? How do I do this? And and how do I pay you? And how do I leave feedback? It was the whole
and
thing.
this is all pre PayPal, right? So it's
I was about to
back
say,
when
did you have to like send like a money
Money
order or
order.
I
something
think
like
I
that?
did.
Yeah.
It was something like that.
postal
Yeah.
money orders only. I remember that one.
Yeah. And of course, that takes me back again, is that when we were doing trades in America back before, it was sending photographs. You had to physically take photographs on a 35mm camera of your props, get them developed, which there wasn't a 1 hour developer back then for us anyway. Put them in an airmail envelope, send them to the US, wait 5 days for it to get there. Maybe they phoned you, maybe they replied by post, maybe there was a deal to be done, maybe there was another question. These deals could take months to do.
Every now and then I
Yeah.
open a drawer and I find in my house or wherever old Polaroids of things from my collection that I took Polaroids of to show someone because I either was trying to sell it or trade it or whatever it was. And Polaroids, at least, were the film was expensive, but it sped up the process. Like you got a week of your life back by just being like, snap, that came out, I'm going to put it in an envelope or, or whatnot. But it always just makes me laugh, just now with phones.
But that was doing business. That really was what it was.
Support for The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's Performance Package, the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code PROPSPODCAST. That's PROPSPODCAST, all caps, at manscaped.com. And if my math is correct, that's 12 million balls, or I guess counting that friend of mine, 11,999,999, because he got hit there when we were like 10 years old. But anyway, that's still a lot of balls.
All right, everybody. So on November 29th, or ending on November 29th, is the Star Trek Picard studio auction. So this is a dedicated auction just to season 1 and season 2 of the Paramount Plus series Star Trek Picard. So throughout the year, Prop Store hosts a number of auctions in conjunction with various movie and television studios. These studio auctions provide a great opportunity for fans to get authentic props costumes directly from their favorite productions. And we're here to talk about the latest one, which is the Picard auction.
The full catalog of approximately 300 lots is currently online for viewing and is open for bidding. And again, the auction ends on November 29th. Prop Store worked hand in hand with the Star Trek archives at Paramount to select items from the Star Trek Picard set, which filmed in Valencia, California, right near Prop Store headquarters, that they felt fans would want, including a selection of including a selection of different Starfleet phasers and Romulan disruptors, including 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan's light-up phaser rifle from Season 1. Examples of different comm badges that were created for the series, including General Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart's Confederation comm badge from Season 2. Borg items, including Agnes Girardi's Borgatti stunt Borg Queen costume from Season 2, a number of different costumes, including Admiral Jean-Luc Picard's stunt Starfleet uniform from Season 2, and various items from Chateau Picard, including a large wine cask for those with space in their house, and Number One's dog collar. That's Picard's dog. What else, Ryan?
There's also a charity component to this auction. So for this particular Star Trek auction, Leonard Nimoy's family has donated Leonard Nimoy's personal Contact 645 camera equipment to be sold to raise money for COPD research. 100% of the Hammer Prize proceeds from the sales of Leonard Nimoy's camera will be donated by the Nimoy family to support UCLA Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Diseases, COPD, research program under Dr. John Belperio. All items except for the charity lot are listed with no reserve, and bidding starts at just $100. So all of the Picard items.
Yes, and as an added bonus on all of those Picard items, each item comes with a certificate of authenticity signed by series exec producer Alex Kurtzman and Prop Store. So go to propstore.com right now to register for the auction. When you register, you are qualified for a drawing to win one of 2 Chateau Picard wine boxes from the production of Star Trek Picard. One winner will be selected at random from all qualified registered bidders that are 18 years or older and a legal resident of the 48 continental United States. Void where prohibited. Official contest rules can be found at propstore.com/star-trek-picard. That's propstore.com/star-trek-picard.
So if you've always wanted to own an authentic piece of the Star Trek universe, this is your chance to make it so. Bid now before the auction ends on November 29th. So did you meet Steven as a collector who was looking to acquire stuff, or did the business partnership form pretty quickly?
No, it was we'd certainly met at the shows.
Did you guys ever go head to head and try and destroy each other over something? No.
I think where we really became connected as I had some episode 1 stuff to sell, which was, I don't know, it was well before the film came out, because it was early stuff. It was like 97, 98.
That was the best time to sell that stuff.
Yeah.
Right before that movie came out.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. It's going to be really good.
That's where
you're going to get your childhood back. Here it is.
Yeah,
Here it comes. There's no one in this movie named Jar Jar. There's no character in this movie named Jar Jar.
Watch the movie and you'll have all that. But that's where we become pals,
Before I want to come back to episode 1 in a second, but I did want to ask this. In the early days, the garage sales and whatnot, were you seeing Star Wars stuff back then? Was there the occasional Star Wars piece?
Definitely.
And how significant, or like more like stormtrooper helmets, or like what kind of stuff were you seeing in those early days?
Well, you've probably heard the story of the TIE Fighter helmet that was at 2 or 3 consecutive shows. It was on this guy's stand. From memory, and it loses track because we've had this conversation amongst a small group of us many times, but it was on this guy's table and it was like £3,000.
Ridiculous.
Exactly. Everybody walked past it with their nose in the air thinking, we're not going to pay £3,000.
Who does he think he is?
Right, it's an outrage. So that stuff was around. I remember seeing Star Wars stuff. But that was the one piece that's really, maybe because that story has come up so many times that
but it was there. I mean, I remember
was there for sure. Yeah.
The Stormtrooper helmet, my first one that I ended up with, which
that was a toy shop.
That was a toy shop ad. Yeah. But before they took out the ad in Toy Shop, I'm pretty sure they carted it around to a couple of different comic shows on the East Coast. If memory serves, the guy was out of the South, I want to say, but I can't remember where. Maybe it's in the ad. I could look. But anyway, they took it to shows, and it was definitely seen at shows, and same sort of thing. I don't know what the price was, but people just went, that's crazy. And eventually he did the auction and I guess got close to the number he wanted, but same thing. I mean, going to a show and seeing a Stormtrooper helmet, I mean, imagine that. And that was people just going, no. Yeah.
But as well, though, I had no experience of what a real Stormtrooper helmet should look like, especially.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's not like you were seeing fake ones either. So it had not quite occurred to us. I mean, that's an interesting question. Like, in terms of fakes or things that weren't what people claimed they were, in the earlier days of the money not being the crazy numbers, the internet not being, eBay where, hey, I've got a COA that says this was Orson Welles' Diet Coke. Whatever it was. When did you start to first, like, were there fakes? Like, how much was that a part of your life? And was it rampant or small, or were you aware that, like, with the internet, that's when you start to see more fakes? Like, when does that come in? Because obviously that is every part of our world right now, is like, trying to figure out, is this real? And it feels like maybe it wasn't.
I feel like it's more of a consideration. I remember having a chat with Jim Latter because I had one of the T1000 hook sections, the piece that gets left on the back of the car. And the one I had came from Jim, but it had a spent squib inside it. It'd clearly been used. But he had other ones. He had a few where the hole was drilled for the squib, but the squib hadn't been inserted. So, even then I was getting an education in, these are backups,
right.
So it was always a consideration, but out and out fakes, I weren't a consideration. I really don't think at that time.
Because when you're seeing that Stormtrooper helmet and in the toy shop conventions, or when you're seeing
the TIE Fighter, whatever you're seeing,
there is no good, decent replica. Because I was in the replica world back then. I can tell you there was no replica that would pass for one of those yet. Maybe in the like the late 90s, but certainly not the mid 90s.
But the larger issue, which I find fascinating, is it didn't even occur to us.
because the money wasn't there.
I had the Stormtrooper checked out because I wanted to know it was real, because at the time I was spending a couple of grand and wanted to just to know, but it wasn't so much that I was thinking it's a fake. Like, I don't even know. Like, I had it checked out to get it checked out, but not in the, I just wanted to know that it was what they said it was, but I wasn't really thinking they're trying to trick me. It was more like, well, maybe it's not what they think it, but like, it was all so honest. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I
It
feel
didn't,
like so the
yeah,
LA guys I was dealing with all had connections, or they were all storied collectors. They were reputable guys. You know, they had a history in this, and they weren't. It was only probably when it started to take off in the UK, when more and more people come into it. It's like anything. As soon as the money appears, the fakes appear.
right,
That's to be accepted.
There you go.
But I couldn't put a finger on it and tell you when that happened, when that crossover happened from
right.
suddenly being concerned whether it was a backup or whether it was just a copy. And then you get, when the money really kicks in, you get guys in the production making extras, and then it really gets muddied.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've talked about that a bunch. I've always been curious, like in your day in, day out, and again, I know you don't answer every call that comes into Prop Store,
From
but
you, I do, David. I always
yeah,
pick
well,
up
I
the red
appreciate
phone goes
that.
off, the red
Yes.
one goes off.
The red, exactly. Oh, it's him. But
I
like,
always
to
get
what,
sent a voicemail. I'm just saying.
how often these days do you get the call about, I've got blank, and they mean it? They think they have blank, but blank turns out to be, you know, a Kenner toy gun that, you know, a
Yeah.
Han Solo gun with batteries in it that makes a pew pew. You know, like how much is that still happening in your world to this
You'd be
day?
surprised it does still happen.
Yeah.
You do get the call where the guy has got the thing. It does happen. Obviously, there's a lot of calls where it doesn't.
Right.
But it's amazing in 2022. And I was just thinking about it the other day, because the Blade Runner coat that is in our auction, the Rutger Hauer coat, was in an attic. We had some publicity. Stephen was on the TV. A lady called and just says, "I have this thing. I'm pretty sure it is, because my husband was a fan, and this is the story." So it sounded good, but that thing was in an attic, and
But
it was
also,
there.
what
Hopefully, I
love-
own it by now, but we'll find out.
hopefully
Fingers
in
crossed.
your attic. But I was just
Yes.
gonna say, there is something wonderful when you see that piece, and I believe it's the T2 jacket, and they were both
Yeah.
just put into charity auctions, and that's how they ended up, obviously, nowadays.
That's right.
But just
And
the
T2 was a big
idea
one.
that
Yeah.
people were just like, yeah, no, here's this for your charity auction, and it probably sold for nothing. It's kind of
Yeah,
wonderful.
one of the
A
first things I was
simpler
really,
time.
really trying to track down when T2 came out was an endo arm, and I still kind of
Sure.
want an endo arm to this day. And one had been donated to a silent auction, and the story goes that Sylvester Stallone bought it for his son, and it was a silent auction, so he probably paid
knows,
well
right?
over the
Yeah.
odds, like $2,000 or $3,000, And I remember sort of tasking Marsha with, because she had connections. I said, "Can you get this thing? Do the Stallones really care that they own this? Surely a collector can buy this back." And so that stuff was being donated for charity. And,
Yeah.
and you've seen that Linda Hamilton letter. It just says, this thing sold for $3,000. Be careful, look after it. Yeah, it's funny.
That's amazing.
But that's why that jacket is so interesting, because of that letter dated the year
the
of
letter,
the movie.
yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
the letter, just pushes it into this other realm, just
Absolutely.
because it's so nice.
Yeah, it's just a moment in time.
Did that arm ever come back around, Tim?
As far as I know, no, because it was supposed to have been the one in the glass tube. It was supposed to be the close-up one, which is obviously the one.
That's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's still the piece I'd love to have.
Yeah.
Very few pieces. As I've gotten older, and I've always been a kind of less is more collector, and my collection is certainly less at the moment. But that is a piece I'd still, hanker to own. It would be a piece I'd go after.
It's
I mean,
interesting sorry, really quick. I was just going to, with all the different Stallone auctions of him selling off his own stuff. Obviously, that's never. I guess he's never really sold anything in those auctions that seems to be like from other
Collected.
people's
Yeah,
movies
yeah.
or things that he might have gathered. Although I guess it certainly would have been a good time. I was just going to jump on, and Ryan, maybe you just let me get this out, and then with whatever you were going to ask too is. Just collecting wise, you've always had, I mean, despite being back in the day, but also having, the opportunity to build that sort of giant, crazy everything collection. You've definitely always been, even just at least in the period I've known you, I always think of you as a very disciplined collector, closer to the way Ryan collects to some extent in terms of identifying a movie, a key piece, and then you're good, and a couple of great pieces, and you're good. Was that? I mean, am I wrong thinking that was always the case, or did you evolve to that? I was curious about that.
No, I've always very much been a minimalist collector. I've always been in the camp that if you walk into a display room, a collector room, and there's just literally one or two things in that room, I feel like that's going to have more gravitas, more impact than I've been into rooms where stuff is crammed onto shelves and it's hanging off the ceiling, and it's, which is fine. There are different types of collector, but I've always been one and done is absolutely a mantra to live by. And Ryan and I have had this conversation many times, right from the early days. And I think it's a great way to go. I would much rather keep it simple. I don't like extra baggage. I don't like clutter. I've always tried to keep my main collection at 10 pieces, and I get kind of stressed and fidgety when it goes over 10.
Where are you at right now? Where are you at right now?
Good question. Probably like 6 or 7.
If you only have 7 pieces, it's really going to be hard for me to flood your apartment and have you like run around like a crazy person. It's much more difficult. It's a lot easier when you have like 100 pieces.
But I have loads of small bits and trinkets and souvenirs and bits and pieces that I don't call the collection. But the actual collection is very select. Always has been. It's always the way
and this is a philosophy I followed, right from the outset. Because when I got in, things were much more expensive. I mean, I things were already in the 5 figures for anything that you would actually want and pursue. and when I got in, I remember Tim said to me, buy what you love and buy the very best thing you can afford, but don't buy too much of it. And that was sort of the mantra.
That's so weird, because Tim pulled me aside when we first met. I think when we were first talking about like some of the Stuart Freeborn stuff, and he just said, buy it all as much as you can, big, little, just fill your place, have it hang from the ceiling. One day your apartment will flood.
That's your apartment with the collectibles. Yes.
It's only now I think about what I just said, and that is your apartment, Dave, isn't it?
It is. Well, it was, but anyway, yeah. No, I take no offense. Ryan, I was curious. I'm going to ask you this question, Ryan, which is obviously, as you said, you kind of came into it as prices were already something. I think what I'm fascinated by with Tim is that he did it from the beginning. Do you think you would have had the same discipline? Let's say you're in it back in 1989, like Tim, and the numbers, I don't know, let's say you have the disposable income in your pocket. Do you think you're a 1 and 2 done kind of guy, or in a different world are you, again, not necessarily me, but you know what I'm saying? Like, are you more?
I think I probably would have stayed fairly in the same lane. I think the thing that I would have always done, and what I was doing, now close to 15 years ago when I got into this, was just trying to find that, A+ piece from all of my favorite films. So I think I would have done more of that early on, but maybe acquired things in order to, trade into the thing that I actually wanted.
Just because buying something and trading was a simpler thing.
Yeah, a good deal is a good deal, a good opportunity. This stuff doesn't come around each time. So if you get the chance to acquire something, even knowing that you're not going to hold on to it long term, I think that's sound.
It would have been toward the end of the same thing, which is the 20 great pieces or whatever it is. Yeah.
No, I was just curious if you think it might have been different. Tim, when's the last time you actually were able to do a trade? Yeah. It doesn't exist so much anymore. It used to. I used to do trades all the time, and I've done one in the last couple of years, but not. way few and far between. Like I've done like one, and beyond that, not really any in a long, long time.
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's years. I think
it's just not I guess it's the money, it's the way things changed, and
yeah.
I'd
like to think that one day somebody will have something that I really want, and I have the exact mirror, and that deal would be done. It'd be really nice to think that still might happen one day. But you're right. I mean, that is something that has perhaps disappeared from the hobby, and it's hard to call it a hobby anymore as well, because it's become
unfortunately is a business. I mean, you guys have been doing it as a business for a while, but you were still a hobbyist within it, but it is very much a business. And we are all thinking about those same things. Another collector that I know once sort of said to me, again, he was not specifically talking about movie props, but I think it's the same. I was curious if you felt this way, that in those early days, especially if you were not getting something, if you were passing over something because maybe you didn't love that movie or you had your one or whatever, in his mind, when he said no to something or let something even go, there was sort of this sense that you might get it back, that if you really wanted to get it back, you could find it again, that you would get it again. And obviously things did disappear, but there was this sense of like, there'll be another, or I'll get that back, or it'll circulate or something. And as opposed to now, where obviously it feels like you buy something or you don't. And if you don't, you may never, I don't know, you may never see it again. Or if, like it's your only, I don't know. Have you thought about that a little bit at all?
Yeah,
Is
no,
that something?
I agree. I think when the money wasn't the issue, that was very much the case. You could always you knew where something was going, and you knew there was a fair chance that you could up the offer a few £100s, and there's a good chance you'd get it back because it wasn't about the money. And it simply has been that when I sell something now, I know it's goodbye. I'm not seeing that again unless I'm going to win the lottery or something. That thing is
And I
gone.
think that's actually in this show of excellent segues, the Shawshank Redemption, the Bible with the hammer cutout. That is a piece from your collection. That is a movie you love. By now, it has sold. Honestly,
Hopefully.
I'll be very honest with you. I might be the owner. It's something I have I've always loved it. I knew you had it. It is a healthy number. I'm not going to lie, but it is. I understand why that number is there. But you definitely have we've been talking a lot about making your peace with like getting rid of something. And so for you, that was, I'm putting a good number on it. If I can get my number, I'll be okay without it. And is that how you kind of think about I guess, how do you think about things that you let go of from your collection these days? And what motivates you to add something to your collection these days? Or maybe what's the last thing you've added, or what's the most recent thing you've added that's maybe a little more significant? I'd be curious.
Yeah, with the Shawshank Bible, I think I was immediately drawn to. I still maintain it is the best piece I've ever owned. As far as significance, it might not be the most. It's hard to. I feel it's worth that particular piece, and I'm not trying to talk it up. It's sold
No,
now.
By the way, the auction's over. Someone, whatever. But I mean, I agree. I mean, Ryan and I think, and Ryan, if you agree with this also, as screenwriters, it is a perfect device in a movie. So obviously it's a custom made thing. It is a real Bible, but the way they cut it all out and the signature and all of that.
In a rare, perfect script movie.
Yeah, it is a incredible movie, one of the great movies, full of incredible performances, but it is a perfect prop in the movie that just brings the whole story together in a way that you hope to write something like that. So I'm with you. I mean, it's part of whatever my attraction is to it, is all of those reasons. So
and when it came along, it wasn't, again, it was, I have to have this, I want this, I love the movie. That is the plot, the prop on which the plot twists, and it's one of the greatest twists and reveals of any movie, which is why the movie's so popular. So I had to have it, and I did the deal. And it was at that, of course, when you buy something like that, you're never thinking about selling it. That's from my cold dead hands, this will leave me. But as the years have gone on, and there comes a point.
Did you get it close to the release of the movie? Did you kind of get it when it came out?
I've had that for about 15 years or so.
Okay.
I've had it a good while, but it was the first really great piece from that. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, it's the greatest piece from that movie. And I've seen newspapers, I've seen prison uniforms, none of that kind of stuff.
They're all good. They're all fine. They're all great.
All wonderful things. And I had one of the letters as well from Red to Andy at one point, which was nice. But it was all, as soon as that Bible was on the table, that's it.
That was it.
The other thing to consider from my own point of view is that my collection has always been kind of a pension plan. It has always been, we can't take this stuff with us. We always say that we're just temporary custodians of this material. Whatever we like to think, however immortal we feel we are, we're not taking this stuff with us. So there has to be an exit strategy. There has to be an end to it for each piece. And the Bible, I just felt like I've enjoyed it. I've loved it. Most people know, certainly in our community, there's a good chunk of people that know that it's mine. And I just feel that, and it's obviously the value is a massive part of the decision to part with it. But I'm, like you say, the number isn't what makes me at peace with it. If it sells for $1 million, it's congratulations, Dave, good purchase.
I was the underbidder. I drove it up to $1 million. I bowed out at $980K, and the guy who won the X-Wing bought it. So yeah, sorry. I mean, good for you, bad for me. But yeah.
But the number isn't the reason that it will give me peace. I sold my Legolas bow many years ago with no expectations on that number. I'd made my peace with it. I'd enjoyed it for a number of years. It's the same with the Bible. I've enjoyed it. It's time for it to go. It's time for it to find a new owner. I can do something with the money. I'm at a stage in my life where I want to do other things. I'll probably reinvest some of it into props again, I'm sure.
Well, that was my next question. Is a little of whatever that hopefully nice number is again, as I said, do you have your eye on something already, or you'll sort of see? And again, what are you looking for these days? Or are you still looking for the same criteria? What does it take for you? And again, forgive the terms, or the words, for someone who's been in it so long, what does it take for you to get excited about a prop that, or even like, what does it take for you to want to spend like money, because a lot of props are money these days in a way that they, I guess, relative, again, when you were a young guy and didn't have a lot of money, everything seems expensive. So maybe that sometimes doesn't change. But again, what enters into your world these days? Like, how do you think about a purchase? Let's go that way.
That's it. That's the nub, because the older, the more seasoned you are, and you guys are going to be the same as well. It's got to be something really special now, or something really interesting now that floats my boat. It's got the last thing that really got me excited that I purchased was the red puffer jacket from American Werewolf in London. That's the last piece, and that was 5 years ago. That was the last piece that came along that I thought,
that's pretty great though.
I want this. Yeah.
Well,
and I don't know what the next piece will be. I can't wait to see it.
But that's okay. But and it just like, you saw it, you knew you had to have it. The money will be the money. You'll figure it out. But you just knew, like, I got to have that jacket.
Correct.
That's pretty wonderful.
Tim has, I have to say, Tim has one of my top 5 favorite pieces that I've ever seen in a private collection. And I think it's probably it's interesting to hear you say the Shawshank Bible was your best piece, but I think this
piece
not
my favorite piece.
Is your favorite
best piece.
Yes. So tell us about what your favorite piece is, which is also my favorite piece.
Yeah. Princess Bride. I know it's a movie we all love, but the Dread Pirate Robert's sword has been in my collection now since 1999, I think. And that was something that Stephen sourced from Nicky Alder, the special effects guy. And that I love. I would. That's it. That's the piece I'm going to keep. When everything else is gone, that will be the last one.
I will say, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but both the movies that we've been talking about, Shawshank and The Princess Bride, were somewhat, I think, disappointing in the theaters. I remember seeing both of them in pretty much empty theaters. And then obviously they became something else. They became these beloved institutions that it feels like, I mean, Shawshank is on television 24 hours a day, but Princess Bride is on a lot as well. And it's just sort of interesting. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but both those movies were sort of, I guess these days they'd say they underperformed at the box office. But at the time, when 4 movies came out every week, they were just sort of, they got great reviews, but people just weren't hooked into them. And I always did feel like there was something very special about, like, almost like if you were one of those people that were there, it's like you almost felt like you were in that sort of little club that makes your attachment to those movies, I don't know, that much more. That being said, I have nothing from Shawshank, or maybe I do now, and I have nothing from Princess Bride, but I've always obviously wanted something. I was always hoping the six-fingered, the Count Rugen sword would show itself, the six-fingered man sword.
Or the glove.
The glove too, the Inigo Montoya sword is my holy grail. I know it's a word we all don't like using on at all, but that's the piece.
That's a fair term for that one. And we know we've seen evidence of the retractable one, but nobody knows where the hero is.
No, I think sorry, my mind went blank. Mandy Patinkin posted not so long ago,
A picture of
and
something.
held up the sword. Yeah, so I think his son owns it or something.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, but there was some differences on it. There were some anomalies on it that and I tried to reach out, but I didn't hear
I
anything
saw
back.
the picture, but I didn't know if it was or wasn't. That's what I would, or if it was just.
I might have
one
seen
of
it and
them.
just
Yeah.
assumed that it was the that Factory Entertainment version.
Yeah, because which is very accurate. No, that's
But did Factory Entertainment, because they used your sword, right, to make the
initially they did, and then they went into the archive. Act 3 Productions and Norman Lear.
Okay.
They maintained an archive, and they had that retractable blade.
So that's how they based
sword, and they also had the other, there were only 2 hero swords for each character. They have the other.
Because that's the other thing
sword.
is I was going to say, obviously, sort of period, but not exactly period, but an expensive movie that didn't have a big budget, so they didn't have 20 swords, or whatever it was. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that rounds it out for me. What an incredible career you've had as a collector,
Tim. It is
from before, from the telegraph to the internet,
from the time of dinosaurs to
tapping out your wants.
All of your prop collecting was via coal.
I said Batman 89, not Batman and Robin. God damn this telegraph Morse code. As nipple suits show up at your house. No. So I would love to play the game. And I was sort of racking my brain for, what should we do? Is that, do we, what's the good old days is the natural, but I think we talked Clint Eastwood. We got to do the Clint Eastwood game.
My head went to Clint Eastwood of like, we'll even let you say like any Clint Eastwood movie ever.
Yes, correct.
What's your Clint opens up. He says, "I remember you. You were that guy that came to South Africa and visited me when we were making the rugby movie. And I want to give you anything you want out of my archive."
Before we get there, Dave, I was thinking more the Clint Eastwood auction sale, and I was wondering what song is Clint singing to you in his singing catalog?
I'll tell you. Hold on a second.
Don't encourage him, man. Don't do this.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I could see that.
Oh, it's broken.
Holding that up, he actually looks like a country DJ.
Even the catalog has had enough of this joke. Anyway, sorry, I segued. I would think a worthwhile segue. So any Clint Eastwood film of all time,
any Clint Eastwood, any prop, any costume,
says
your choice. Yeah,
I think it's so obvious. It's such a no-brainer. It's the poncho. It doesn't even need thinking about. You don't even need to think about it. It's so, and I appreciate that's a very predictable.
Does he have it? Do you know? Does he have it? Are you aware?
He does. It's one of a kind. For 3 movies, that thing was one of a kind, and you can see the repairs on it as it's running through the 3 movies. He has it. The story goes, I remember talking to somebody at the Warner Brothers archive about it, that he literally found it in a bin liner in the back of his wardrobe, walked in the following morning to his office, kind of handed it to his secretary and said, "Just found this. Let's do something with it." It went obviously into, he maintains a collection, but it went to the Warner Brothers archive guys so they could look at it and insure it. I believe it's insured on the spot for like $4 million, and which was many years ago too.
Yeah.
And then it became part. It's toured since then. I know it's been on various exhibitions, but yeah, it is part of the collection that he maintains. And he did.
I didn't realize I didn't realize he's toured his collection. I was actually curious.
Elements of it. I know it went into. Is it the Gene Autry Museum?
Sure.
Yeah, and there's. I know it's cropped up in another exhibition, but I remember seeing a few years ago. You can probably Google it. He turned up at something in Carmel where he wore it again.
Oh wow!
It was just like 3 or 4 years ago, and he had his hat from High Plains Drifter, or it was the hat from it was the hat from Unforgiven, the shirt from High Plains Drifter, and the poncho, because he just went into his store and threw this stuff on, and he keeps it, and that would if I had a more realistic thing, maybe
don't be realistic.
Dirty Harry ID would be another cool thing.
Sure,
yeah.
I was thinking, the classic sort of the "Do you feel lucky" punk gun. But I'm not a gun guy, but Dirty Harry, it just feels like a gun. I mean,
except for all the guns you do have.
Right. But but I was trying to think of what. Yeah, it's so hard with him because it's like you want to go classic, but even like forgetting about all those old wonderful movies, it's just like even like I don't know, Unforgiven is perfect,
Wonderful,
and
wonderful movie.
Yeah.
yeah. Ryan, how
Ryan?
about you, Clint Eastwood?
Yeah, I mean, I immediately go to his hats, and I think of his hat from Unforgiven. But I don't know that. I mean, the point of that movie is that it's not iconic, and in the look, because
Right, it's purposely
it's
not.
just a
Yes,
guy.
exactly. Yeah.
So you'd have to explain that that's the Unforgiven hat. So the thing that I go to is probably my favorite sort of classic sort of Clint as good guy Western, which is Outlaw Josie Wales, and that hat is so particularly unique because it's kind of a Confederacy hat, and it has the the sort of pencil rolled brim and the tassels on it, and I just that thing is an icon. And
We've spoken about that before, haven't we?
We have,
yeah.
I got very close. I found something infuriatingly close to what that should have been, and
almost,
yes,
yeah.
another topic for another episode.
That might have been a trade. That might have been something.
Yeah, I don't even understand why that existed, but that's the mystery of time. But yeah, I just think of like one of his hats that just clearly is it. But I think
that hat shows up. Do you give up the sword for that hat?
That was a conversation we were having.
Okay, nice. I like it.
Yeah.
So trades could come back. This could be the comeback.
I very much doubt it, but yeah, there's a few things where you'd actually think, yeah. Sell a kidney or something. Yeah.
But I think Dirty Harry, gun to my head, I think I would just say The Unforgiven Hat, because that is my favorite Clint Eastwood movie, and I, again, as a screenwriter, just in terms of a perfect story, and David Peoples, who wrote my other favorite film, Blade Runner. I just there's so much to have there, and I would just put the photo of him up with it, and there you go. That's The Unforgiven.
It's hard to argue, but because you can't deconstruct the Western until you construct the Western. Do you know what I mean? And it's rare that a guy got to build the Western archetype and then undermine it and deconstruct it. I mean, that's a rare career. Yeah, it's just kind of wonderful.
It is truly
Nobody said Any Which Way You Can. No one said Any Which Way You Can. That's the first Clint Eastwood movie I ever saw.
Oh, great.
My uncle had a Betamax, and he had Any Which Way You Can and Every Which Way But Loose.
They were like his biggest box office hits for years.
Oh, they were huge, and they're fantastic. They're really
you wouldn't take the chimp, Dave?
I would take Clyde in a second.
In an acrylic case.
And every now and then, I'm sure you've seen these too, Tim, because I feel like I always if I see anything Clint Eastwood related, I send you an email. I feel like I annoy you.
You do. There's actually an artwork on my wall over to my left, which you put me onto, and
I'll bump into especially like illustration art guys, and somewhere out there are a couple of those. Bob Peake did the Any Which Way But Loose and every and there are, I've never seen the final ones, but I think there's like a prelim that has made its way around the market, and every time it kind of pops back up, I almost buy it. That's an almost buy for
Ryan
me.
owns a piece I particularly cover, which is that again Unforgiven, one of the
Bill Sienkiewicz
comps. Which is that will probably be my Unforgiven piece for all time, because that was the closest I could get, and it's great because it's clear right as soon as you look at it what it is. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a beauty. It really is.
Did I tell you, Bill? Did I tell you Bill Sienkiewicz did art for us for White House Plumbers?
Oh, that's amazing. No.
Yeah, they do these there's a pitch where they're kind of pitching.
Is Electra in White House Plumbers?
Yes, exactly. But he just did these very kind of, 1972 sort of styled art of, they kind of pitched the different dirty plans that they had, and they brought in like pitch art, and Bill Sienkiewicz did the pitch art for that scene. Yeah, it's
that's
actually kind of neat.
I'd love to see that.
Kind of cool. Yeah. All righty. Well,
thank you, Tim.
Tim, here's the good news. One, this was fascinating, just beyond fascinating. But two, I feel like we can bring you back because I have other questions about some of the. I feel like our audience would enjoy more of the Stuart Freeborn stuff. So that's going to be
funny.
We'll bring you back for that. Yeah,
we were talking about this only yesterday. That was 18 years ago that we went to help Stuart out, and it blows my mind. It was so long ago.
I feel like that was the first time I feel like I ended up making contact with you guys. Like I knew you existed, but then, and it was after that, because it was after it was like I
Incredible
kind
time.
of got the back end of the sale. Some things were spoken for, but
Yeah.
it's just a funny thing, but it's just such an amazing story that,
And how we would handle
yeah.
it so differently now as well if we
Yeah.
were given that opportunity now. We did right by Stuart and we did right by ourselves, and it was right for the community, and it was fantastic. But yeah, that is a good story. That is we should get Stephen on for that as well.
Well, maybe that'll be a future, because it's almost like a great. It's not exactly a hunt because you got a phone call, so it's a little
Sure, he
different
called
than a
us,
hunt.
yeah.
But it's hunt adjacent.
handling an archive. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that would be a great topic to discuss with both of you guys. I mean, there you go. Future episode.
Future episode one, obviously we'll have Clint Eastwood on to talk about his archive, and then we'll
Correct.
follow
Ladies and
that
gentlemen,
right up
yeah,
with you guys. That'll be perfect.
Correct.
Those two.
Right after the
Thank-
Kenny Rogers episode.
Thank you for putting up with my voice today as well. I do appreciate
Oh
it.
no,
It's,
feel better,
pretty bad,
and
bad.
go lay down on your big bed of money from your hammer sale. I mean, from
Yeah.
your Bible sale.
Thanks for that, Dave. I
that'll
appreciate it.
Make you feel better. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, this was fantastic. We will be back next week. In the meantime, please subscribe, give us 5 stars, tell friends about it. You can follow us on all social media at Props Podcast. You can find us on YouTube on our Stuff Dreams Are Made Of channel, and you can watch the show and see examples, some of the stuff that Tim mentioned. We'll have pictures and stuff there. You can email us at
dreamsaremadeofpodcast@gmail.com.
at gmail.com.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.